back to the Dining In Cookbook Club. I'm Amber and we have been cooking our way through the Food52 Genius recipes. So here's what's on the menu for this week. I'm so excited. It's perfect for fall and hopefully wish that it's win because after last week, I'll link it up here if you want to see that. We need a victory, let's just say that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on these two recipes. For our first recipe, it's a spicy tomato soup on page 87 in the cookbook. And in case you are wondering why there are two different soup consistencies here, the original recipe in the cookbook is more of a broth soup, and I prefer a thicker and creamier soup, and so I will show you in the recipe making of this exactly how and what I did to get a thicker and creamier soup with not adding any extra ingredients. So let's go ahead and see how these soups ended up tasting, and then I'll show you my little trick. All right, let's get started. This is good. Wow. Wow, this is so good. And I'm really impressed because it's made from canned tomatoes. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Still really good. Here's what you'll need to make this recipe at home. In a large pot, add 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1/2 of an onion and bring that to a medium-high heat, stirring occasionally for about 10 minutes until the onions are nice and tender and translucent. Next, add as much red pepper flakes as you prefer or to your liking. I used about 1.5 teaspoons, and that was a perfect amount of heat, but not too spicy like last week. And then you can add the water to the mixture as well as the 2 cans of tomatoes. And you're going to just bring that all to a boil, and once it reaches a boil, you're going to reduce that to a simmer for 30 minutes. Now, the recipe does say that if you are in a hurry, that you can actually do it for less time, just reduce the amount of water. So I really like that tip, but I was not in a hurry, so I just did what the normal recipe said. Also, during these 30 minutes that the soup is going to simmer for, you want to stir it occasionally, so make sure that nothing sticks to the bottom of the pan and just to keep an even distribution of the heat. After 30 minutes, you're going to add your 1/4 cup of basil and some salt and pepper to the mix and give it a good stir. Then go ahead and turn the heat off and take it completely off the heat and let it rest for 5 minutes. And while it's resting for 5 minutes, you can go ahead and get your blender for the next step, which we will be using the blender in small batches of the soup mixture to make creamy. And for this, there's a couple quick tricks to keep in mind when doing this. So you want a blender that has enough room for the soup mixture to move around in, so don't fill your blender all the way up. The second thing is you want to start off with a low speed first and then gradually work your way up so that it doesn't spray the soup everywhere. The next tip is to have a lid that can either have the pour lid to be removed, which is that little tiny plastic part at the top, and then you can use a kitchen towel to cover that so that the steam can be released, but it doesn't create a seal so that the top of your blender could potentially pop off and soup will be everywhere. If you don't have one of those, then you can just use a kitchen towel, and I would recommend using a kitchen towel that you don't mind getting a little bit of tomato sauce on, and you can just use that to cover the top of your blender. This still allows the steam to be able to come out and rise from the top and not have enough pressure to pop a blender lid off, which can happen. Didn't happen to me, but can happen. Anyways, and then after that, you're going to take a sieve and place it over a heat-proof bowl and pour the mixture into the sieve. You're going to run the spoon on the back of it until the broth seeps out. And they said in the recipe that you can discard the leftovers that's in the sieve, but this is where I took that and I thought, I actually really like these basil chunks and the thicker, creamier consistency. So what I ended up doing was making only a small batch of the broth as the original recipe, and then I ended up just pureeing the rest of the soup and leaving it as the creamy marinade-ish mixture, and I really like that. If you want to do that at home, then go for it. But here we have it. We have 2 different soups out of 1 recipe. Who knew? I didn't when I started this. Let's go ahead and rate these. And let me know in the comments below if you prefer a more broth-like consistency or a creamier one. For the soup, I really like this a lot. This I'm going to give a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I prefer actually the thicker consistency, so if you were not to put it through the strainer, you really get the basil really is infused into the tomato soup. If you were to strain it, you get less of it, and it's like a hint back there, but it's a very much more tomato sauce soup type thing. My rating for just the soup of how the recipe was written, to have it as more of a watery soup, I would give this a 3 stars. It's pretty good. I just really like the basil. It feels like a big hug in a cup. So good. For the recipe ratings, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 3 stars. I really like the tips and tricks in this recipe book, especially since it explains to start off with half a teaspoon of red pepper flakes and then work your way up to 1 teaspoon. So I thought that was a great way to not overburden your palate and give you an opportunity to taste as you go. And they do give you a tip to use the discards if you were to strain for just making the broth itself, and you can use the discards to either top off on pasta or bruschetta bread or something like that. So I do appreciate that tip so that you don't waste food. Our next recipe is on page 166, and it's the classic grilled cheese sandwiches. Now, they use mayonnaise instead of butter to get that crispy golden brown outside. Let's go ahead and give this a try and see how we like it. Good, guys. Now, I do still prefer the butter over the mayonnaise because you can taste the mayonnaise on it. For that, I just prefer the butter taste, and if you have anyone at home that really doesn't like mayonnaise, then you might just do butter. Now, in the recipe, it notes that the mayonnaise is great because it, one, I think adds a little bit of protein, but it doesn't burn as fast. Let's go ahead and make this dish, and here's what you'll need to get started. If you have a skillet, heat it up to 350 degrees, or if you have a pan, then you can just warm it up to medium-high heat. Grab some bread and mayonnaise and smear the mayonnaise on the bread and making sure you get all those edges. Then place it onto the skillet once it's hot enough and top it with some cheddar cheese, enough to your liking. I used about 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup on each of the sliced bread. Once you have enough cheese on there, you're just going to take the other slice of bread and place it on top of the cheese to make a sandwich, making sure that there is mayonnaise on the outer slice of the bread. Then cook the grilled cheese sandwiches on each side for 4 to 5 minutes and just let them be for that whole time and then flip them. You can check on them to make sure the heat's okay, but I would just let them sit. And then after you take them off, you're gonna let them rest for a minute and then dig in. Now, I do grilled cheese a little bit differently. Typically, I like the butter mixture, and I actually like to put a little bit of garlic powder on and parsley. It just makes it a little bit fancy, and the garlic really goes a long way. So if you want to try that, that's how I enhance my grilled cheeses at home, and it's so good, guys. You won't go back to a regular grilled cheese afterwards. Like, seriously, you won't. Anyways, that's my little trick. It's a super basic recipe, but guys, look at this little tiny cheese pull. You know you made a good grilled cheese when you have a cheese pull. Yes. So for the rating portion of these, I'm going to go ahead and give the grilled cheese sandwiches a 3.5 out of 5 stars. They're really great. I mean, it's bread and cheese. How can you go wrong with it? But they're not like super amazing, the best ever I've ever had. So 3.5 stars it is. For the recipe rating, I'm going to give that a 2.5 out of 3 stars just because it doesn't specify on the amount of ingredients that you should use. But they did say to use a rustic bread, so that gives them big bonus points because it's much better than just putting it on some basic white bread, for sure. And I didn't know about the mayonnaise thing, that it doesn't burn as fast as butter. So that's really helpful to know. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video, and if you like what you see or you want to be notified for the next video to come out, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can know when the next video comes out. I feel like I just repeated myself. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!